Senator Wachowski.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor. And I know you made a comment about the constituents really don't care about what level of government is paying for this, but we're faced with the fact that 38 counties are not self-help counties. There, as I look at the PCI trends, surprisingly, it seems that the roads are in the worst shape or in those counties where those people are driving on those roads and they're indifferent to helping themselves out. What are we to do with that if we're to look at a state solution?
Senator Wachowski, I appreciate the question. Certainly, we all have to dig into our pockets here. And I'm certainly open to any incentives that the state might craft to encourage counties to step up. We're certainly going to do it. We're seeing counties all around us. Alameda County just passed a measure last year. I think people get it. Most residents understand that we get what we pay for, and if we want roads in good condition, we'll all have to pay for them.
The initial bill that I introduced, which, as Senator Cannella pointed out, was really kind of a short-term bill, a limited bill that probably, if now we're talking about this, maybe should be expanded, had a special fund to incentivize the non-self-help counties to pass measures. And I think we're going to hear from a county supervisor in the future here. He's going to address that from Stanislaus County President of CSAC, who maybe can give us some thoughts on how to incentivize those counties, because he's been working very hard in his county to get a sales tax. I think they've tried twice in Stanislaus. So I think that's a legitimate issue to raise.
I guess the next point is the vice chair who's left us. You identified in your testimony that the local roads need $78 billion with a B. The chair, as he has indicated, our starting point, at least with the bill that was introduced, would have realized $18 billion. So I like the pirate analogy because my colleagues on the Republican side, if they have to walk the plank, let's make it only once, right? There we have to go out there. So can you give us your insight as a local mayor? We got 18, 78, and there was a suggestion that we should just not do maintenance, but we should do some investment on that. So I don't know where that number goes, but as a person on the road, not on the road, on the bike, on the street, where do you fall on this?
Well, I'm a big believer, having been through the legislative process at the local level, that you never make the perfect the enemy of the good. We'll take whatever this legislature is willing to give. We recognize we're going to need to step up locally. San Francisco is doing it next year. We're doing it next year. I think everybody recognizes that. But critically, before we continue to build, we need to fix it first. And we know the costs of doing nothing on basic maintenance are far too great in the future. I would advocate that we get the dollars to fix it first before we invest an awful lot of money in expanding freeways.
Okay, Senator McGuire.
So much, Mr. Chair, and do appreciate the testimony, Mr. Mayor. I think you're absolutely right. Coming from a Board of Supervisors just about 7 months ago, local roads are critical to the infrastructure for economic development or local economies. So I think you hit a really good tone and do appreciate that. I think the one item that I just wanted to comment on is the issue of self-help counties. I come from a self-help county, and it's benefited us tremendously, particularly for Highway 101. And we also tax ourselves for the Sonoma-Marin Area Rail Transit District, but also represent an area of the state that is among the poorest. And we can't expect a Lake County, who is the poorest in the state, to be able to do the same thing that a Sonoma or a Santa Clara or an Alameda may. And I think that's the one area that I just want to caution, is that particularly for rural California, a one-size-fits-all approach doesn't necessarily work for like Lake or Trinity or Del Norte, where you only have 28,000 residents and their average household income of 4 is $32,000. So I think we need to be able to focus on self-help. We need to make sure those self-help counties do benefit. It makes sense since they're leveraging, and again, it's benefited Sonoma County. Just want to caution on the one-size-fits-all approach as we look across the state. Thank you.
Very good point. Senator Pat Bates.
Thank you, Chairman. Very, very important meeting, and those of us who've been involved in transportation, actually, that's how I got involved in politics, actually, was advocating for transportation improvements. I've walked the plank a number of times. I'm a Republican, and I voted for our Measure M, both the original and M2. And I come from a part of Orange County that's very, very red, okay? Don't vote for taxes, don't vote for fees. But our architects of our self-help were very, very good at describing where the money was going. And I caution all of us, we will not get something passed in this legislature unless the people out in our cities and our counties know that the money's coming to them and it's coming to the priorities in their regions. And here with us today is one of my mentors, Will Kempton, who was our executive director of the Orange County Transportation Authority, upon which I sat. And we made promises, and those were kept, and had no problem on the second round to get M2 passed, is what we call it. And in southern Orange County, it passed with almost 75% of voters voting in favor. So it's just what has to be foundational to anything we do. We cannot continue to pile on taxes when people don't know where the money's going, and it goes in many other places instead of transportation. Very low priority this year in terms of the budget. You only need to look at it for the last 5 years has been a low priority. And all of a sudden, you know, we're crying crisis. Well, if it is a crisis, then let's respond to the people out there and show them what we're going to do for them in their various regions, their cities, and their counties. Because without that, we will not get that backing, and we need it, or nothing happens up here.
Thank you, Senator Bates. And your point's very well taken. I might just add, if we could just get Will Kempton to serve in every county in California, we could get a lot more of these measures passed.
I don't know if he wants to do that.
Wait a minute. He got his start representing Agora Hills many years ago. I have stories.
Mr. Chairman.
Who was asking? Assemblyman Fraser, Chair Fraser, you have a question.
Well, it's based on that self-help county perspective, where we see the self-help counties now putting in $4 billion a year from these 20 counties, fulfilling a gap that we can't provide in this arena here right now. But you look at, I have ACA 4, which is going to be able to lower the threshold to 55%, and we'll be in rev and tax in the Assembly coming soon. But we're also looking at different delivery methods. We're looking at tolling agreements. We're looking at all kinds of different processes. I mean, this is our big year. We have to go big or go home this year. We know that. And this is why I'm very proud that the governor's called this special session, because he has identified that this is the time to do it, and for us to collaborate and understand that, you know what, we are going to make the commitment, we are going to get it out there, and one thing I will say is it will be substantial this year.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I do want to express my appreciation for your leadership on ACA 4.
Senator Hertzberg.
As we have the mayor of San Jose here, which is in many respects the heart of innovation at this point in history in California, you know, I've been reading these reports for 40 years. The sky is falling and the sky is falling. And when I served before, we were looking at John Dutra was the chair of the Transportation Committee from your region, and you remember this, Mr. Secretary, and oh my God, the sales tax on gasoline's going up, and we need to dedicate that revenue. And then we had all this extra money when Governor Davis was in office, and it was a $5.7 billion traffic relief congestion program, and we did that. And then Arnold Schwarzenegger was in office with Don Parada, and they did $10-point-something billion, and everybody says the sky's falling. And all I'm saying is, look, indeed there's costs, but what's happening is, I think, and I only say this to share this in terms of the thinking. We're talking about, I'm a believer in debt financing, I don't have any quarrel with it, but what happens is we undermine confidence in government when we continue to come to the people and tell them, oh, just do this and we'll solve the problem. There are hundreds of examples, and if you really probe why folks are frustrated about government, why they're turned off, is because we don't provide them with a big picture vision. We have an emergency, we have a crisis, we have a special session, we want to have a bunch of money. We just spent $4.3 billion in our neck of the, $3.2 billion in our neck of the woods to widen one of the freeways, and traffic is just as bad as it always was, and people are frustrated. Put a few people to work. It took, fixed a couple of bridges from earthquake standards, but it did nothing, right? The 405. If you study history in New York and you talk about Bob Moses and all the stuff that he did, the more he built, the more they came. It requires a different kind of think, in my judgment. If we're looking to create indebtedness that goes to 2050 or 40, whatever it's going to be, is this the way the world's going to go? We have environmental standards that say we want to reduce the sale of gasoline and all oil products by 50%, as carried by the Pro Tem. We have SB 32 in terms of changing those factors. We have SB 375 with Senator Steinberg. My only suggestion is that as we look at this stuff and as we look to solutions, it is incumbent upon us not to look backwards, but to look forwards. And what is the vision? Course correct along the way, but offer a vision. Integrate different areas of policy. Tell the people that this is a small step toward a larger goal of where we're going, so that they are not back there and telling us, oh my God, you lied to us again. It's the Arnold Schwarzenegger $15 billion in the triple flip, if those who remember it, and all of a sudden then, you know, it was Gray Davis with the triple flip with Steve Peace, and then Arnold had to come in and says, I tear up the credit card, and then all the new problems. We see this over and over and over again. And for me, who wants an activist government, confidence in government is everything. And that means you tell people the truth, you offer a vision, and you focus. And what worries me in this discussion is here we are in a special session. I share this with everybody. And here we are, urgent problems. Let's go and get the dough to fix it and put whatever it may be. And we might be able to do that. But in my judgment, when you look at the turnout being less and confidence being less, that's the challenge. And the challenge for all of us is to do not just the big dollar, which is I'm all for, but the big think, and offer a vision of what that part is, and integrate transportation-oriented housing, the bullet train. What are all those things? Because the bottom line, and I'll close here, is that those who are in the current time are the worst predictors of the future. We have a zillion examples of that, and our judgment as legislators in this great state that we want to brag about all the time is to do that big think and to take that big risk. And I just share that with you. I think in terms of, especially coming from San Jose, to engage.
Senator, I appreciate that very much, and I just want to let you know we are being innovative in the city of San Jose. We have repurposed our potholes as traffic calming devices.
Okay. Oh boy, that was a bad one. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. For seeing other questions for the mayor. Thank you for, and maybe on the way out you can go talk to the governor, have a chat with him about the transportation needs, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for coming, and I appreciate your time and energy on this issue. As a team player, we're going to work together. Thank you, Senator. Thank you. Okay, we'd like to this time call roll and formally call the roll.
Bell.
Here.
Bell present. Canella. Allen. Here. Allen present. Bates. Here. Bates present. Berryhill. Here. Berryhill present. Gaines. Hertzberg.
We're calling roll.
Hertzberg present. Leyva. Here. Leyva present. Liu. McGuire. McGuire present. Mendoza. Pavley.
Here.
Pavley present. Wykowski. Wykowski present.
Okay. Thank you. We have a quorum. Now, after the mayor spoke, I think that we'll hear from the state side of the question, and we have, thank you, Sam, for coming. And Sam, go Bells. That's our high school. Went to the same high school. We'll hear from Brian Kelly. Brian is our Secretary of Transportation, really knows his business. So I'll turn it over to Brian. Thank you, Brian, for coming down, and we appreciate your thoughts. So I'll turn it over to Brian.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. I am Brian Kelly, the Secretary of the State Transportation Agency, and I have here with me as well the Director of Caltrans, Malcolm Doherty, sitting directly behind me. He was sitting directly behind me. He's somewhere in the room. Oh, now he's sitting next to me. Sorry. Happy to take part in this. As you know, the governor first highlighted the issue of a deferred maintenance backlog that we've had in our transportation system for decades, and highlighted initially in the January budget presentation, reiterated the need to get something done in the May revise, and of course, most recently called the special session to keep a focus on this area. I've been asked to come here today and talk a little bit about the state's needs in this area, and I'm happy to happy to do that. I'm also happy to answer any of your questions. I thought what I might do is provide some sort of overarching principles that we are thinking about as we address these issues that are before all of you. And of course, we're mindful that whatever's done in this area takes a 2/3 vote and is going to take some work on getting cooperation and buy-in from all sides of all caucuses in both houses. And so I think there's a lot of discussion to have going forward. First, a principle or guideline that's been guiding us is that we think it's important that transportation funding is permanent, stable, and paid for by users of the state transportation system. California has not increased the dedicated transportation revenue since the passage of Prop 111 in 1990 that provided a phased increase in the state's excise tax rate from 9 cents to 18 cents. As the chairman mentioned earlier, that's 25 years ago. As a result, necessary investments to maintain and improve the condition of our state and local highways and roads and bridges have not been made. The most recent investments in transportation relied upon bond funds in 2006, Proposition 1B, to support one-time investments resulting in long-term obligation to pay the debt, incurred with roughly $1 of every $2 generated being spent on interest payments. The way to stabilize transportation funding from our perspective now is to do what's been needed for decades, and that is to fund transportation through user-based revenues, separate from the general fund, and dedicated to transportation purposes. In terms of areas of investment, as the governor has well articulated publicly on several occasions, our focus is a fix-it-first focus. Because there's been a lack of dedicated resources from the transportation side, the state has an identified deferred maintenance gap of $5.7 billion annually in its highway protection program known as the SHOP. I want to inform the members that we do report the SHOP program to the legislature. It looks like this, and we report it every 2 years. And you can see, if you look through that document, growth over time and the discrepancy between available revenues and the cost of maintaining our system. That's one, because the revenue we do have is pretty flat. Two, we have increasing demand on the system, increasing wear and tear on the system. And third, we have an aged system. The state highway system in California was largely built in the 1 or 2 decades following World War II. I think the average age of our bridges is on the order of 47. So with that, more and more, 47 years old. Goodness. So 5.7 is our yeah, that's right. $5.7 billion annually is our identified gap. That this report also reflects, and I think you have a colored copy of a piece of paper that looks like this. Mine's black and white, but yours is colored.
Yes, pretty soon the bridges will be able to get the AARP card.
That's right. Some 564 state-owned bridges are in distressed condition. Many other bridges are not up to today's design standards for weight, height clearance, or seismic and collision standards. And that's important because when you talk about the movements of goods and people, sometimes they've got to take longer routes using more vehicle miles traveled because they don't have access to older bridges. The state pavement condition ranks toward the bottom nationally. 41% of the state's pavement is either in distressed condition or in need of preventative maintenance, and it's expected to deteriorate further without an ongoing dedicated revenue stream. More than 61% of our culverts beneath the state roadways and bridges need to be repaired or replaced. And finally, in the maintenance area, levels of service for potholes, things like potholes, tree trimming, bridge maintenance, litter, and graffiti, would get letter grades of Ds or Fs today, but should and could get As with new dedicated funding. These conditions jeopardize the reliability of the state's trillion-dollar assets and the safety of the motoring public. New revenues, we think, should focus first on needed repairs to California's transportation assets. Just one note on this, in 2006, when we passed Proposition 1B and the voters passed Proposition 1B, that was a $20 billion transportation bond, of which only $500 million was dedicated to rehabilitation and maintenance of the state system. There are significant rehabilitation and maintenance needs on local streets and roads and transit systems too, as Mayor Liccardo pointed out. And so we believe that a fix-it-first emphasis for whatever we do in transportation is appropriate. That's not to say we should ignore expanded capacity as well. Our focus on that would be in the area of goods movement. Getting products to the global market reliably is vital to California today and must be maintained for a sustainable economic future. As you all know, California is home to 3 of the nation's 5 largest ports. The largest ports in Southern California, Los Angeles and Long Beach, process 40% of the containerized cargo entering the United States, and well-functioning trade corridors are necessary for California to maintain its global leadership in trade. By way of background, for the first time that the state of California focused public revenue on trade corridors or trade as a place to invest was in Proposition 1B with the Trade Corridor Improvement Fund. That was a $2 billion program of projects that improved rail, highway, and port infrastructure. The state dollars in that program were leveraged on a 4-to-1 basis, and the $2 billion that were provided by the bond bill provided a total of $8 billion in value in 81 projects valued at $8 billion. So an ongoing commitment to improving the state's trade corridors, including improving efficiency and encouraging more sustainable practices, will pay economic and environmental dividends for California. We think it's very important to tie any investments, and I think this gets to the point that Senator Bates made, and at some level, Senator Hertzberg. We know we cannot raise enough revenue to meet all the needs for the state and locals. But we can try to put together a program or a package of performance measures that we will meet. I think Proposition 1B in some measure started that process. We put together a bond bill that was a $20 billion bond bill. I would say also that it did not contain a single project in it. It was a bond bill that had categories of funds and a commitment to move the program forward in a 10-year horizon. And that's exactly what occurred. We would say, hold us accountable here. We think with investment of dollars, we can improve the condition of our bridges to specific standards. We can improve the condition of our pavement to specific standards. We can make sure our maintenance level of service is getting letters A's and not D's and F's. And we are willing and welcome being held accountable to that. So for our purposes, we would, again, focusing on Fix It First, focusing on the trade corridors we can get done at the state level, we'd be more than happy to, on an annual basis, report to the CTC, report to the legislature on how we are doing against a specific set of performance metrics, and would welcome that in this process. Finally, improving efficiency at Caltrans. Caltrans is always on the hunt to improve efficiency. We're utilizing new procurement methods, innovative equipment and material to improve department efficiency. Additional strategies like permit streamlining and advanced mitigation can produce additional money-saving efficiencies that could be reinvested in the state's transportation system. And I would note under the department's new strategic management plan, there is a commitment for more performance-based management techniques to achieve greater efficiencies and find cost savings within the operations of the department. Finally, and speaking directly to the point by Mayor Liccardo, we do think it's important for the state to continue to be a good partner with our local stakeholders. Major transportation investment packages of the past have provided funding for both state and local infrastructure. As many of you are probably aware, even our gas tax has direct subventions to locals to take care of streets and roads, and the Prop 1B bond bill in 2006 provided more than $2 billion for local street and road improvements. While the state has considerable deferred maintenance costs due to decades of underinvestment in preservation, we do recognize that local infrastructure is also in need of new investment. A balanced, comprehensive funding plan we think should place an emphasis on Fix It First funding to improve state highways and bridges, but also provide funding for local transportation infrastructure. The state has done this in numerous ways. One, as I mentioned, was direct subventions. Another is beginning in the late 1980s, and then repeated in Proposition 1B. We did work on something called the State Local Partnership Program. And that's where the state has put up some revenue that can be matched by locals who are doing self-help measures. And the nice thing about that is, getting to a point by Senator McGuire, it doesn't necessarily require that local match be a sales tax. It could be developer fees, it could be other things that locals are bringing to the table to invest in transportation. And I think there's some incentive when the state says we value that, we'll provide match money for that kind of a program. So again, we are open and do think it's important to partner well with the locals going forward. Finally, just one other note. It is true that in this budget proposal and the conversations that the governor's had concurrent with the budget proposal, our focus has been on roads, on fixing our highways, on fixing our bridges, and on investing in our trade corridors. But I want to say, too, that the governor and the early part of this administration had a focus on other parts of the transportation system that are continuing and that are paying dividends. All the work that we've done collectively, legislature and the executive branch, to move forward on the cap and trade funding program is funding public transit improvements throughout California. Earlier this week, our agency awarded the first $225 million in those grant programs to transit improvements up and down the state of California, affecting virtually every region. And we continue to believe that the implementation of a high-speed rail system in California would benefit the state. And so I think our approach over the several years has been broad-based. It's true our focus now is really on the condition of our system and on trade corridors. And I look forward to working with all of you as we tackle difficult challenges of funding in the next few weeks. And I'm happy to answer any of your questions. Thank you for having me here today.
Thank you, Brian, for your leadership in the department and being a change agent for transportation in California. I wanted to ask you, you mentioned that you believe that we should develop some process for performance measurements and improving the performance of the not just Caltrans, but the full system of how we develop transportation in California. The bottom line is, can we get projects done quicker and on time and on budget? So is the performance measurement you seek to be improving delivery in terms of completing projects quicker, on time, on budget? Faster delivery is an obvious way you can save money. And how do you feel about that issue? And as terms of a performance measure, I think that's a key for a lot of people. A lot of people want to see quicker delivery.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate.
Want everything built yesterday.
Yes.
So
I do appreciate the question, and I think it's in more than one area. I want to be clear that my reference to performance measures was really speaking to the point that Senator Bates raised on making sure that you're holding folks accountable for how dollars are spent. And what I'm interested in, and I think we are happy to participate with all of you in saying, look, when we are saying we want new revenue for specific purposes, even if it's to upgrade the condition of our system, there are specific measurements that you can put into place and say, this is what we're trying to achieve. In 5 years, in 10 years, bring us in annually to talk about us, make us report to the CTC on it, have us come to these committees and tell you where we are. And if there's a need for mid-course adjustment on where monies are going because we're under-delivering, we understand that, and we're willing to accept that. On the project delivery side, I would say, Mr. Chairman, that there are opportunities probably to help deliver projects sooner. We have in the past done things to streamline permit approvals to make that a little bit quicker. That usually involves communication and some clock or timeline around different agencies talking and working through the permitting issues. You've all passed legislation in 2009 that sought to speed that up, and I'm told from the department that there was a value in that process. So there's that. We think we can go a long way in places like advanced mitigation, where you can identify your mitigation needs earlier in the process, set aside money for it, and then move more quickly on delivering the project. Again, Orange County has been a leader in that area.
yeah, they did a good job on that. I studied that. Orange County, Senator Bates did a great job.
That's something I think that we're interested in implementing more aggressively at the state level and can learn a lot from that experience. So there are ways to improve project delivery, and those are just a couple that jump to my mind. And again, if it was a metric that folks were interested in, we would engage in that conversation.
I think the conversation has got to be part of this special session. So I heard from Senator Cannella, he was always emphasizing that particular issue. And of course, as you know, my history of, making sure projects get built on time and on budget. Yep. I'm pretty insistent on that. So I think for us in this special session, we need to maybe come up with a punch list of things we could do for project delivery. If we're ever going to consider any funding, I think that has to be done. And then efficiencies at Caltrans in terms of making the organization, what kind of changes in the organization do inspire us to see in the next few years that we can work together on?
One thing that I would point to first, that in the last year, the department has adopted a new mission, vision, and a set of goals moving forward, and that includes a greater emphasis on efficiency. We are adopting processes to use performance-based management and kind of eliminate processes in decision-making that waste time and are not productive and sometimes have cost implications. So we think through those exercises, we'll see improvement out of what the department does. There's always a conversation about the resource mix of staff between state staff and consultant staff, and at times we think there's certainly when you have a big increase in workload, that mix and how that works is always something that's a discussion that's probably worthwhile. Those are a couple that jump to mind. I would also just say that we are constantly in a state of using technology and materials that are increase efficiency. And one example that I would point to there is just in the SHOP program. Just months ago, our SHOP estimated need was actually $5.9 billion, and one of the reasons it's down to 5.7 is we used new technology that allowed us to get a better look at the condition of the roadways, and some of our preservation numbers dropped as a result of that. So we found savings. So that difference dropped a little bit, but that was the outcome of using new technology to examine the conditions of our system. So there's a whole breadth and suite of areas where we are seeking greater efficiency. Most recently, we are using a new reflective material on signs that would reduce the need to have lighting on the signs. That lighting comes with costs. It also comes with catwalks that people use for graffiti. So if we can remove the lighting and remove the catwalks, we can benefit in maintenance reductions on graffiti and lighting expenses. So again, there's a suite of things that we're incorporating on a daily basis to improve efficiency of the department. And we are certainly open to conversations and additional things that can be incorporated.
Yeah, I got another area. It's an area that's real, as you will hear, close to my heart, and that's that I think Caltrans and the state and the local governments, when we complete transportation projects, ought to make a big effort to train unemployed, especially young people, work with groups like the Conservation Corps, pre-apprenticeship programs, get areas of high unemployment for people that have been unemployed in our high unemployment areas jobs. And to me, that's very important. I think it would have a dividend for the state in a social, economic way in terms of benefiting families in California that have a need to find work. So I think these pre-apprenticeship programs working with our labor organizations are really good ideas. Job training, working with Conservation Corps and those types of groups to do, more of the routine kind of tasks. We can also stretch our dollars pretty good by doing that. How do you feel about those kinds of ideas, and how do you feel about, especially in areas of high unemployment, setting up these kinds of programs?
I'm going to look to the Director Doherty. I would tell you that on, just on the the basis of what those accomplish, supportive of the idea of doing more of that. We have used Conservation Corps on various landscape things in the past, is my recollection. I think Malcolm can speak more directly to some internship programs and apprenticeship programs that are utilized at the
Training people
department.
for careers in construction.
Right.